The French and Indian War. The focus of this lesson is the consequences of the French and Indian War, but first let's make certain that we remember and understand who was fighting this war. So the French and Indian War is a war that is going to be fought between the French in North America along with their Indian allies against the English, who are also fighting with colonial militia groups, and that is what the French and Indian War is. So make sure you scribble that down on your chart so you don't forget what the French and Indian War was, since so many people think it's a war between the French and the Indians. All right, so here is North America in the time period just before the French and Indian War. And as you can see, the pink group over here is the Spanish claims, and France is claiming all of this area in the blue. And the English are over here along the East Coast. So basically the French and the English are going to be fighting over the area of the Ohio River Valley, as you learned in the previous video that you watched. All right, so the consequences of the French and Indian War. Again, we're going to need to be able to list these consequences, and you will have a written question on your test for this. So what were the consequences of the French and Indian War? Because as we go through the rest of this unit, we're going to be connecting these consequences to the outbreak of the American Revolution. All right, first, France lost, and they lost badly. So they lost all their territory in North America, except they were able to hold on to New Orleans, and they also were granted fishing rights off of the coast of Nova Scotia. British territory expanded greatly. Not only did they get a huge swath of North America that had once belonged to the French, they also gained territory in India, and I think they got a couple islands along the Caribbean. So British territory expanded, huge expansion of territory, while at the same time Britain was left with an enormous national debt. They had never had a debt like this in their entire history, so at the end of the French and Indian War, the British government sort of freaking out, how are we going to pay for this debt? And at the same time, the colonists had been fighting alongside the British Army. So colonists like George Washington and Henry Knox were going to remember this when they get ready to fight against the British in the American Revolution. They're going to remember what some of the strengths and weaknesses of the British military were that they saw when they were fighting alongside them in the French and Indian War. Another consequence of the French and Indian War was that the colonists learned how strong they were when they were united, because in the past, during the early colonial period, the colonies sort of operated on their own, one-on-one. They didn't really want to come together in any way, and even when Benjamin Franklin suggested the Albany Plan of Union, which would have been simply a unification for the purposes of defense, the colonies were not eager to embrace that idea. So when they came together to fight the French and Indian War, they learned some lessons about what they could do when they were united. And that is going to carry on with them when they move into the years leading up to the Revolution and realize that they're going to have to work together to push back against Great Britain. The final consequence is that since the French were totally pushed out of North America, the lands west of the Appalachian Mountains opened up to settlement, and the English colonists could actually now go there, whereas in the past, part of the reason they weren't moving west of the Appalachians was they were afraid of the competition with the French, and now they don't have to fear any kind of conflict with running into French forces. So these are the consequences of the French and Indian War. We also are going to need to know the treaty for that war, and that would be the Treaty of Paris 1763 that ended the French and Indian War. Now, you must connect the date with this treaty because there are several treaties of Paris in U.S. history. So in order to make certain we know which Treaty of Paris we're talking about, always refer to the date that goes with it. Okay, so here are basically the boundary lines that are going to be created by the Treaty of Paris. The green is all of the English territory and the orange is Spanish. So basically what happened is the English got all the territory east of the Mississippi River, including Florida, and the Spanish got the rest of the territory west of the Mississippi River. And as you can see, Russia is starting to come down the Pacific coast here. And that is going to be an issue later, especially as we get into James Monroe's presidency. So make certain that you understand all of these consequences and that you can list the consequences of the French and Indian War.